You can take your gum out of your mouth.
And welcome once again to today's Rowdy.com Big Three, where we talk NASCAR racing, sitting with Buck Beaver. I'm Bass Masters. Jerome Buzz Cutler has some questions for us, and I think one of them came from Facebook.
That's right, from the Rowdy Facebook page, which is Facebook.com/Rowdy Racing. This is from Rowdy member, longtime Rowdy member, Mark Duell.
Right.
He says, look, if NASCAR would have done to Carl Edwards what it should have done after Atlanta, parked him for a couple of races, would we have to be dealing with this nonsense again now?
Yeah, that's a legitimate question.
Is it nonsense? That's what I have to say.
Well, I have to say, you know, if Carl Edwards had suffered a consequence of some consequence after Atlanta, then he would have had to think twice about doing the same thing, essentially, wrecking Keselowski on purpose, turning him, hooking him, and putting him in the wall at St. Louis. Wouldn't he have had to think twice? Instead, he got like basically a slap on the wrist, which was like, you know, this is no big deal to us, so he did it again. I mean, I at the time, I went back and read my blog that I wrote at the time, and I said they've just postponed the day of reckoning. And I hope that when the day of reckoning comes, it's not a fateful day. It's not a horrible day. And it wasn't. Keselowski was fine, and everyone's fine. Now, I still think they're in the same position, though. They're going to have to draw some lines.
NASCAR has got bad TV ratings or lower TV ratings. They need attention. This gives them attention. This is front page
So
news.
does the end, justify the means?
I don't know, but
I mean, attention is great and all, but if a guy ends up in the hospital,
I know. I don't want someone to die.
What if the Shelby Howard's car had been, you know, a few feet one way or the other?
I agree.
And it hit right in the door.
But is this the actual end of the world? Is this just everyone's losing their mind about it? But is it really?
No, it's
that
not
bad?
the end of the world.
Is it that bad?
Here's my point. Okay, people want to say like, well, once you have to stick with have at it and not do anything, because if you do anything, then you've completely retracted your policy of have at it. And I say that's malarkey. I mean, just because you don't want a police state doesn't mean there's no police at all.
Let's move on to issue number 2. Our good buddy and my fellow Gamecock, Jeff Owens, from SceneDaily.com, wrote an article the other day about what he thinks are good ways to change the chase. And one of the positions he advocates is something we've discussed here at Rowdy internally. I'm not sure we've ever discussed it publicly, which is giving the chase drivers their own standalone points system.
Yes. I will say this. I always, when the chase first came out, that was my immediate assumption, was that they had their own point system. And so when it didn't come to fruition, I was surprised. I don't think it's an insane idea.
I think that's one of those ideas that you're going to have some unintended consequences that you don't like. Because what it sounds like is, oh, everything will be so much closer because I can't wreck and finish 43rd and lose all those points, right? Mm-hmm. The worst he can finish is 12th. But there's a couple things there. Number one, that means a guy can't make up a bunch of points either. It means the most points you can make up on any one driver in any one race, if it were 1 point per position, for example, would be 11. So if you're 12 points behind and go into the last race, sounds close, but you might as well be, in the current system, 165 points behind, because you got the same no shot that you had before. And the second thing is, what incentive do I have if I'm one of those chase drivers and there's, 41 other guys on the racetrack that I'm not racing against? What incentive do I have to race these men? None. It would be crazy to race you if you're not in the chase and I'm in the chase, because I'm not going to get any points for passing you. Why would I do anything but let you go if there's the least question? And if I work hard, why would I work hard to pass you if I'm faster when I get nothing for it?
Buck, do you have any response to that, or shall we just move on?
Move along, move along.
Issue number 3. We're coming up on the Brickyard 400 at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and everybody says, oh, this is such a prestigious event. It's one of the top NASCAR's events. I don't get that. Yes, it's a historic venue, but not as far as NASCAR is concerned, and the racing is questionable. It's hit or miss. So I don't put the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the same category as Bristol or Darlington or Charlotte or Daytona. Just because you have history in another series doesn't mean that history translates to our series, does it?
Translates a little bit, but I mean, I think, well, go ahead, Buck. You're shaking your head.
I hate Cutler for maybe being right on this one. I hate him for it. I hate him for it because it is such a storied track. The Indianapolis 500, the history of motorsports in America, but the history of motorsports in America and the Indy 500 and the glory of it all was open wheel racing. And open wheel racing has fallen apart. Sorry, they did it. It is pretty damn cool that we go to Indy because of the history of the track, but the history of the track has been open wheel. It is. I mean,
think you have to remember a couple things here. Number one, this is maybe the most famous motorsports venue in the entire world. Number two, that you have to remember over the years, and we're old enough to remember, the questions like, why can't we race NASCAR at the Brickyard? Why can't we? Wouldn't it be cool if we could? And there was such a long time thinking up to that, wondering, hoping up to that 1994 race whether we could put stock cars on that track or would be able to figure out a way to put stock cars on that track. And they did it. And it was a huge, huge deal at the time. Having said all that, I do think it's legitimate to say, our history is at Daytona. Our history is at Darlington. Our history is at Charlotte, places like that. Now, I put Indy in the mix there just because of the venue itself and how historic it is and how important it is to motorsports in our country. But it is not a traditional stock car venue, and that does take away a little bit from the prestige of it compared to a place like, say, Darlington, which isn't as old and isn't as important to the overall history of motorsports in America, but it's more important to stock car racing.
The reason, we sort of overblow Indy is because we talk to the drivers, and the drivers like Tony Stewart, and they sit there and they talk about the Andrettis and the A.J. Foyts. A.J. Foyt is absolutely, utterly Tony Stewart's hero, and A.J. Foyt owned the Indy 500.
Well, it's not just the open-wheel drivers; it's the venue. So, you know how many guys tried to make the first race at Indy in '94? It's like 84 drivers tried to make that first race. It was a huge deal.
It's an amazing place, but I see the point. I'm not even going to grant the point, but I see the point.
All right, that has been your Rowdy.com Big 3 for today. Thank you for commenting on Facebook with that question, Mark. We appreciate that. If you have an issue you'd like us to address right here on the program, you can go to our Facebook page or go to Rowdy.com, send us a message there, and tell us what you're thinking about the issues of the day. We'll be back tomorrow.
Rowdy.com. Say it like it is.
Say what like it is?
Rowdy.com.